Thank you very much, Doug, and thank you all for coming this morning, and thank you, Doug, to Deloitte for hosting us. To me, giving energy speeches can sometimes feel like being in a bit of a time warp. I've been given versions of this speech for about 4 years now, and while we are very supportive of the government's direction of travel, progress has been frustratingly slow. In 2009, the CBI published a report called Decision Time. 1 year later, we followed that up and upped the ante with a report called No Time to Lose. If we were to put one out today, it would probably need a title that would make Malcolm Tucker blush. But for all of that, the energy challenges we face are by now pretty familiar. The security of supply crunch looms closer, as Ofgem projects capacity margins falling from 14% in 2012-13 to 4% by 2015-16. Yes, we've had bold rhetoric on decarbonisation, but we're not yet on course. And the CBI's infrastructure survey shows that in the current economic climate, a whopping 95% of businesses are worried about the cost of energy. Now, of course, planning for the energy future is complicated and means taking into consideration many uncertainties. Technology costs, fuel costs, and political trends, to name but three. And we know it takes time to make investment decisions and to build infrastructure, which is why we can't afford to have a sort of wait-and-see attitude. So my core message today is that we need to boost investor confidence urgently across all technologies to address our energy challenges and reap the economic benefits of doing so. So that means, first, recognising that energy investment is as much about growth as it is about secure and low-carbon power. Second, hammering out the policy detail. And third, sending out a unified political message from government that the UK is open for energy business. So let's start with the first point, recognising that investment in energy can be a huge economic boost. The CBI's Colour of Growth report that we published in the summer showed that green business, including clean energy, already employs nearly 1 million people and could add £20 billion to UK GDP in the next 3 years. We need an estimated £110 billion worth of investment in our energy system. And if we get building now, we can avoid the risks that we face that are the supply crunch, as well as not decarbonising quickly enough. And that investment has to be seen as a huge economic opportunity for the UK. All the evidence points towards the need for a balanced and diverse mix as the most cost-effective pathway to decarbonisation. And that includes new nuclear, new renewables, new carbon capture and storage, and new unabated gas. Now, the government's aims of about 20 gigawatts of new gas capacity by 2030, we think, is pretty much in the right ballpark. And the government is right, we think, to encourage safe shale gas extraction, because it makes sense to maximise the amount of energy that we can produce at home at a reasonable cost. But gas alone isn't the answer. Most modelling shows that future European gas prices are going to rise, with or without an influx of unconventional gas. And so from both a cost and a security perspective, a mixed portfolio of generating technologies looks pretty favourable. So our plea is to stop arguing about the energy mix and focus on attracting investment to create jobs and growth as quickly as possible. And if we're going to get that growth, we must make sure our energy plans work for all parts of the economy. Paying for investment does mean that bills are going to go up. But to get the most bang for this buck, we must ensure policy is always cost effective. And we must take care over the families and businesses put most at risk by these rising costs. Now, industries which use a lot of energy as a core part of their processes, like iron and steel, chemicals, aluminium and cement, to name but a few, are a key element to a low-carbon economy. We cannot afford, environmentally or economically, to drive those jobs overseas. And to ensure the competitiveness of our energy-intensive industries, we will need to keep pushing for a level playing field internationally. And that was a point I was making to the UN's chief negotiator, Christiana Figueres, when I met her this week. But of course, we can also be smarter about how we go about the low-carbon transition here at home. And that means, to my second point, getting that investment flowing. But to do that, there's a great deal of policy detail that needs filling in. Now, there's no business case for putting billions and billions of pounds into these long-lived assets if investors cannot see a long-term, stable policy framework. And right now, from their perspective, the policy future looks too much like a blank canvas. And we mustn't forget that an effective policy framework begins at the European level. We believe that there's far too little emphasis is being placed on securing the future of the EU emissions trading scheme. And much of the policy complexity we're facing here in the UK is being constructed to compensate for the lack of a European vision beyond 2020. Now, the CBI has been saying for a pretty long time that we need an EU emissions goal for 2030. And next month, we're going to be publishing our proposals for the future of the EU ETS, which will address the possibility of short-term change and, crucially, how the system can be improved to better support energy-intensive industries. But we do, of course, need a UK energy bill. And the case has been made for a more managed market, and we think the government should be upfront about that and make clear that this is where we're heading. We fully appreciate the government's efforts to consult thoroughly and to get those changes right. But we mustn't fall victim to analysis by paralysis. Paralysis by analysis, even. The longer we go on, yeah, that didn't sound right. The longer we go on without finalised policy, the longer investment stalls or just goes abroad. So our top 3 priorities for the energy bill are these. Number 1, we must know what the cap on incentive payments, the so-called levy control framework, will be beyond the current 2015 horizon. Projects being considered right now may well not be built or operating by then. And the size of the pot has to be aligned with meeting Climate Change Act targets and carbon budgets, and should give visibility for as far into the future as possible. Number 2, we need more clarity on how the capacity mechanism is to ensure security of supply, how that's going to operate. Now, we know a lot of good work is being done on the design of incentives for low carbon power, the contracts for difference, to make sure they attract investment. But the capacity mechanism is equally important because it will affect immediate investment decisions and what to do with existing plants. And number 3, we must make sure the bill works for the most at-risk energy-intensive businesses. That means designing in, from the start, exemptions for the pass-through costs of the incentives. And it means making sure that the incentives work for combined heat and power and carbon capture and storage, both technologies that will really help our energy-intensive sectors. Now, you'll probably notice that the heated discussion about putting carbon targets in the bill doesn't make it onto this priority list. So let me be clear. The CBI strongly supports the Climate Change Act and carbon budgets. The energy bill must deliver the pace of decarbonisation required to achieve them, which means that the levy control framework and the delivery plans must be set with them firmly in mind. And this link to the existing Climate Change Act targets should be therefore enshrined in the energy bill. Because when we ask financiers what they need to help them make their investment decisions, they don't mention more targets. What they're crying out for is a substantive policy detail I've set out, the specifics that are going to enable them to build a business case and price up capital. And one last thing that's going to help boost investment, this is my final point, is that even once these policy details are in place, we need a unified political message from government. Once investors have crunched through the rate of return calculations based on the current policy setup, investors then price in political risk. And it could take years to going from committing capital to a planned project to getting it up and running. But what happens in the intervening period? How many times will the rate you're going to receive change, they wonder, as we saw in the solar feed-in tariffs last year and the row over the renewables obligation this year. We are, of course, seeing energy policy in the UK becoming increasingly political. Are you green or are you for growth? Are you for renewables or are you for gas? Fruitless debates over these false choices, we believe, can seem like they're noises off. But for the investment community, they matter. With every news story that adds to the sense of uncertainty, I hear of more phone calls from overseas head offices to UK executives asking, is it worth putting further work into scoping out possible investments in the UK? We are competing on an international stage for investment and should never forget that. With all the policy I's dotted and T's crossed, the need for a single, clear message from government that the UK is open for energy business isn't going to go away. So let me finish by where I started, by saying that the clock is still ticking. The energy bill is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to boost our economy and head off our energy challenges. We need to grab that opportunity before it's too late. We need less politics and more policy. Thank you very much for listening. And on that point, Secretary of State, that means it's over to you.